What is up, everybody? We are having a wonderful episode for you, the Bearded Tog Podcast, and just super excited about where we're heading and the people we're going to have on and the topics we're going to cover. We've got so much content for you guys that I think if you were starting a business and you didn't know anything, like you listen to all 40 some episodes of this podcast and you'd be set up in a really good spot. So something that we're talking about today with Alicia is just kind of album sales. Honestly, like we're talking about that. We're also talking about just making transitions in your business. And she started her business in Europe, and I did a really bad job of introducing her. Name is Alicia from Alicia Ann Photographers. She's based in Connecticut. I actually met Alicia on my second wedding ever 5, 6, 7 years ago, and she was just so helpful and so kind, and I watched her work and was like, I still want to do this. She was amazing, and so it was so cool to see her. And now she's a queen. She does amazing work. She's got such a good associate team underneath her, and she shares a lot about that in this episode. And she also just shares the value and importance of tangible albums and photos and prints, and just kind of a little bit about her personal life. So I love that. So without any further ado, here's Alicia. Alicia, how's it going?
It's going good.
Yeah? How's the weather up there? I feel like it's cold here, and you guys are like another level up in Connecticut.
Yeah, this winter has been kind of crazy. A couple weeks ago, well, I think most of the United States experienced this, but we just had this crazy deep freeze where it was like below zero for a few days. And then last Friday, it was 60 degrees. So I have no idea. I mean, right now, this morning it was flurrying. It's kind of gray out. I think we're supposed to get some more snow tomorrow. So that's winter in New England.
Do you guys essentially have snow like pretty often at least where you guys live?
It totally depends. So the last couple years, we haven't really. 2 years ago, in fact, that's when we had our dog Atlas for the first winter. He was about 6 months old, and we were so excited because he's a Samoyed, as you know, and he's white and fluffy, and he was made for winter. And that winter in particular, it snowed 2 times, and it was like an inch each time. So our poor dog that was made for snow never really even got to experience it his first year of life. So last year we had a little bit more, but it wasn't significant. And then this year, they've been calling for a rough winter for a long time. And I was kind of hoping for and believing for one. I personally love winter. I love the snow. I also have the advantage that our neighbor actually does our driveway for us because he has a snowplow. So I literally get to sit in my kitchen and watch the snow fall, and I don't have to deal with any of the now we have to shovel and clean off the cars. And so I just get to enjoy it. So all that to say, this year we've had quite a bit of snow. So I think it was 2 weeks ago, we got 12 inches, and it snowed, I think, starting the end of November. So yeah, we're getting another few inches tomorrow, and it'll be pretty.
That's awesome. At least Atlas can be a happy dog then.
Yeah, he's loving it. And Alex is actually, my son Alex, who's 14 months old, is now starting to just observe and notice that there's white stuff out there. It doesn't look like it normally does. And I took him on the sled last week for the first time out and back. And I had both the boys out there, and Atlas, as Atlas normally is, was acting like a jerk and just being a fool out there. And so he kept actually knocking Alex over, and he was face planting in the snow. And I'm like, this is not working. I need to wait until my husband comes out and can help me manage these two together.
Totally. That's awesome. Yeah. So I've already kind of talked about a little bit of what I know about you, and I'm so thankful that, at least in my photography journey, we met on my second wedding ever back in the day. I think it was 2011 or 2012. And that was when I did video for weddings. So that was a long time ago.
Was that Katie and Ty's wedding?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I remember just watching you, and at the time you shot with your fiance at the time, but now your husband, Adam. Great name. And you shot together. And I remember I was half shooting video and doing my job, and then half watching you guys, and I was just oh, what does she do? And I remember watching you do family formals and organizing and kind of yelling and arranging people, and you knew the family pretty well anyway, so that helped. And I think I still think of you in that moment today when I do formals, 100 weddings later. So it's super cool. But how long have you been shooting weddings, and what do you do now, and what does life look like, kind of in between those two times?
Gosh, it's a very broad question because I've been shooting since I was 11 or 12. I first started with a Barbie 110 millimeter camera. And it's funny because I never played with Barbies, but for some reason I had this Barbie camera. And I just started like taking pictures for fun. And I would say that I started taking it more seriously probably when I was like 16, 17, around there. And I went to school, I went off to college, and definitely started getting more into photography. So that's when I began enjoying portraiture of people. I mean, when I look back now, I'm like, my work totally sucked, but I was passionate about it then, and I loved doing it. I just loved working with people. My first wedding was, gosh, I should probably check, but I want to say it'll be 11 or 12 years this July. So it was one of my good friends. She was one of my best friends at the time, and she was a missionary to Sudan, and she's American, and she met her husband there who was Swiss. They both met in Sudan doing missionary work, and they like had a shotgun wedding. So she was like 18 years old, goes to Sudan on this like missions trip and decides to go there for a few months, meets this guy, and then out of nowhere, they're like getting married in 4 months. And I think all of us were like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? They're still married. They've got 4 kids. So that's why I said I should check, because I think they're celebrating their 11th or 12th anniversary this coming July. Yeah. And that was my very first wedding. So she was like, we went to Bible school together, and she was like, I know that you love taking pictures. Can you take pictures at my wedding? And I was kind of like, well, I love taking pictures, but I've never done a wedding. And I'm not one of these people that think that just because I have a good camera, I'd upgraded at that time past the Barbie camera. But I'm like, I don't think that just because I have a good camera that means I'm a great wedding photographer. And she was like, I really don't care. I just want some like snapshots of the day. And so I was like, well, I guess I can do that. So I did it. And I remember Googling ahead of time, like wedding picture ideas on Google, and like trying to memorize poses and ideas. And I think I even searched like, how do you shoot a wedding? Like something like that. So that was 11 or 12 years ago. And that same year I moved to Copenhagen, Denmark, and I was a missionary there for 5 years, and shot weddings on the side kind of for fun while I was working there full time, and never really intended on doing this full time at all. I thought I would be doing humanitarian work my whole life. I thought I would be doing something, just interacting with people more on a daily basis. Maybe within the confines of church walls, but maybe not necessarily. I always just loved humanitarian work. So when I decided to leave Denmark and move back to the States, which was 5 years later, and I think now 8 years ago, I decided to go full time with wedding photography. And at that point, I had shot probably like 30 weddings over the course of the 5 years that I was in Denmark, just for fun. And so I learned a lot. I kind of had this safety net in that Danish photographers at that time didn't do what's standard here, where the photographer stays, the entire wedding day. We photograph getting ready and the ceremony and portraits and the reception. There, they kind of did, even just like 10, 12 years ago, what our grandparents' generation did, where they would go to the studio for like 20 minutes after their ceremony and take an official wedding portrait. And that was it. The only other photos they really had were candids from friends. So we're talking people our age, in the digital age, that easily could have had photographers follow them throughout the day. And it just wasn't common. And even to this day, it's a lot more common now in Denmark, but it's still, to have somebody there getting ready is not common at all. For the most part, photographers are just hired for portraits or portraits in the ceremony, or sometimes if you get the big package, it's portraits, ceremony, and like part of their reception. So in Denmark, it just wasn't standard to have somebody there the better part of your wedding day. So when I was documenting these weddings, people were catching on and being like, oh, I love that you're there, taking pictures of the bride getting ready. So I just started booking weddings on the side of my full-time job for fun. So all that say, by the time I moved back to the States, I had about 30 weddings under my belt and just decided to jump in head first into running a business. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea that there was a wedding industry, that the wedding industry is what it is, that within the wedding industry, there's sub-industries of photography and, floral work. And so I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But I went full time. I really just resolved to not get another job and to just make this work. And that was, I think it'll be 9 years ago in August of this year. And I haven't looked back. It's been 9 really exciting, fun, challenging at times, but really exciting years.
That is incredible. I had no idea that you were a missionary in Denmark. I always knew that you loved just Europe and kind of like, and I'm totally blanking on my geography. Denmark is not part of Scandinavia, right?
It is.
Oh, it is.
I thought you were going to say, is Denmark? So people are usually like, is Denmark the capital of Sweden?
Oh, no.
Or they'll be like, so Denmark is where Amsterdam is, right? And I'm like, no. It's this little tiny country of 5 million people. It's situated directly north of the Netherlands and kind of northwest of Germany, and then all the way like southwest tip of Sweden. So it's the southernmost country in Scandinavia.
Oh, interesting. I love that.
The tiniest.
I had no idea about that, and that's so cool. And you started kind of like, I feel like a lot of Americans love the idea of like the destination photographer or like shooting in other countries, and you're like, that's where I started, and then I came back here, and that's awesome. That's super cool. Something I've always I've loved about you, and I think because you maybe just had a little bit earlier start and you started in a different country, so maybe different packages were available and you had different ideas, is nowadays most photographers that I know, at least in the wedding industry, are what we call shoot and share. And I am in that as well. As I charge as much as I can up front and shoot the wedding, and then I deliver a majority of the edited images, and they're in high resolution, and then I send them a gallery, and that's basically it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But something about you don't do that, right? So tell me a little bit more about kind of your process and just your packages, because I feel like they are at least different to me, but maybe you can talk about like what inspired you to do them that way.
Totally. So I started out being shoot and share. I still am shoot and share to a large extent. And I think I got to a point where I've probably been doing this now for probably 4 or 5 years, I would say, with this system. And it's worked well for me. So I started out just, shoot and burn on CDs with a printed label back in the day when, once again, I had no idea what I was doing. And I was doing that, but what I found is that I really wanted to sell more albums. I really firmly believe that every client should have an album for many reasons, not the least of which is when I'm shooting photos on a wedding day especially I think of the bride getting ready, that's like a special part of the day for me and something that's near and dear to my heart. But when I'm shooting those images, I'm envisioning her years and years from now, 15 years from now, 25 years from now, 30 years from now, sitting down with her daughters and her granddaughters and reliving these moments and talking about how she felt the morning of her wedding and, the nerves or the excitement or maybe the tears because somebody special wasn't able to be there or, just the joyous smiles, all these emotions that she's experiencing. And I imagine her sitting down with her daughter or granddaughter and reliving those moments as she's looking through her album. So I love that we live in a digital age. I love that we have the convenience of digital photos, but I feel like I actually read an article recently about how our generation is going to be one of the only generations that doesn't have documentation of our childhood or something like that, or how we have documentation, but because most people don't print nowadays because it's all digital, it's just easy to like lose those digital images.
Sure.
As you know, sometimes phones crash or die and then you lose images or whatever. And unless if you're a photographer like we are, most people don't have a good backup system for their photos. And so they were saying how, the age of printed portraits is done and dying, and how the kids that are born nowadays are the ones that are like, I think they said like 10 or 15 years old will be the first generation of children who don't have printed images to show their kids. And I was just like, man, like that's something that's so near and dear to my heart, is that I actually, just this morning, I sorted through, I made all our 2017 prints for Alex and just our family in general. And I got a make and stow box that has, the word 2017 on it. And it's just a bunch of like 300 loose prints of 4x6. No rhyme or reason. They're iPhone portraits, there's some professional portraits, but just a documentation, a hard copy documentation of our year 2017. And I do that because I want my kids someday to be able to look back and thumb through those. And I've done that with Adam. Every time I go back to his parents to visit, his mom has shoe boxes and shoe boxes full of printed portraits. And every time she breaks them out, each photo has a story to go along with it. And she pulls out the one of him throwing a little fit. And she always says, Adam was a really great kid, but every now and then, he'd get his little attitude. And and I love that so much. And so when I'm taking pictures on a wedding day, that's what I'm picturing is years from now, them sitting down with an album, thumbing through it and her talking about the emotion that she felt the morning of her wedding, what it was like the moment that those doors opened to the church and she saw their dad or their granddad for the first time. And just, all the way through the end of the night when people are acting like fools on the dance floor and, this is your crazy Uncle Bob who you should have seen what he was doing and he was trying to make out with all the girls that night or whatever, like all the stories that come. And I really feel that one of the best ways to accomplish that is through an album. So I got to this point in my business where I was trying to sell clients albums and nobody was buying them because they were, a minimum investment of, I think at that time, they were a minimum of $500 all the way up to $2,000. And when you're paying for a wedding, it's like, we're going to try and save wherever we can. And so another $1,500 is just not in budget if they can forgo it. So I started thinking about how can I sell albums in a way that is enticing to clients where I'm maybe adding something that is high value, low cost for me, but enough that it's going to entice them to add one to their package. So I came up with this idea of only including, I call it standard resolution photos. So the standard resolution photos can be printed up to 5x7 is what I tell clients. Now, the truth is that I don't have time to compress all the images and blah, blah, blah. I always upload all the high-res files to pass. That's just what I do. So if any of my clients are listening to this, which they probably won't because I don't have any photographer clients right now, they'll be like, are you serious?
Happy holidays.
No, yeah, exactly. I actually do upload all the high-res ones to pass, and that's just because I don't have time to deal with I'm a huge advocate of automation and efficiency.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't have time to sit here and compress all these images, upload them, and then 3 months later the clients come back and say, oh, actually, we do want the high res. So now I've got to upload them all again. So I just upload all the high res ones. But what I tell them in their meeting and then upfront in their contract is that they get the standard resolution images, which can be printed up to 5x7. The high res files are $1,000 or free with the purchase of any album. And so our base album is $1,000. So you can guess what everybody does. They either add that base album on, or they just say, well, skip it for now. So I went from selling, I would say probably about 10% of my clients were getting albums back then to I'm now at probably 75%, 75 to 80% of my clients get albums. So not only is it a little bit of an upsell, so it's a little bit more money in my pocket, which is never a bad thing, but I'm also getting to know that my clients are going to have a tangible thing to relive their wedding day for years and years and years to come. And they're not going to have to keep going back to their pass gallery. And I don't know if you use Pixieset or Pass or what you use, but pass galleries expire in 10 years, which sounds like a lot up front, but I'm now facing the reality that come a couple years from now, my early weddings are going to expire.
Right.
And I'm like, where did those 10 years go? Because I've been with Pass from the start. So I don't know if it's 7 or 8 years or maybe it's 6, but I think it's more than that. So yeah, I'm coming now up to wow, in a couple of years, these galleries that I thought felt eternal at that time are now going to expire. So I don't even know what the solution is. I should probably reach out to Pass, or they'll probably start rolling that out eventually. But yeah, so I just wanted something tangible for them to have. So that's what I decided to do with my packages is just say, the high-res files are $1,000 or free with the purchase of an album. And that skyrocketed my album sales.
That's incredible. That is so smart. Do you think, what was that change like? Because that could be an awkward change, obviously, if, one bride is referred to you, and of course you're like, oh, that happens all the time if you up your prices every year or something like that.
Right.
Was that an awkward thing, or did you feel more comfortable selling it and just be like, hey, check out this album, it's baller?
So it was awkward for me in that I think anytime you raise your prices, you just go through this nail biting am I going to lose my business? Is anybody going to book me? Am I going to be able to pay my bills next month? Like, you just wonder if people are going to be like, no, that's too expensive. Like, or are they going to feel like I'm nickel and diming them? Or are they going to feel like, wow, she's just trying to, squeeze us for whatever we're worth? I think all of those normal questions were in my head and insecurities. And I've had those questions and insecurities pretty much every time I've raised my prices. And I think that's something that's very familiar with photographers, is just, when you up your prices $500 or $1,000, or for me at one point, I made a jump from $4,000 to $6,500. And I was like, nobody's ever going to book me ever again in my life.
That is insane. When did you do that? Why? That is crazy.
So, well, this is a whole other probably podcast and story, but just about being intentional with balancing business and family. I did it when I was pregnant with Alex, and I knew at that point. So I think there was probably a $750 difference between myself and my associates at that point. And at that price point, everyone's like, we want you. And I kept being like, why is nobody wanting to book my associates? And I was like having to sell them. And I forget who it was. I want to say that it was, I don't know if you know Amelia Jane. I think it was her, that she was just like, you're priced way too close to them. And I was like, what? And she's like, you are like $750 in the grand scheme of the average wedding in Connecticut is $40,000. You're priced way too close to them. Of course, people are going to book you. And so I had a couple people that I respect just review my prices.
Sure.
And I was like, next year when I have my son, I only want to shoot 5 weddings. And I wanted that because I knew that there was a really good chance that he would be our only child. And I didn't ever want to look back and say, I wish that I had more time with my son, but instead I was shooting weddings. Because the reality is that I could scale back this year and not lose my business. I could just figure out a way to have my associates shooting more and not lose my business. And so I just had to make a hard, fast decision that I was going to drastically, and it was drastic. I mean, I went from $4,000 to $6,500, drastically increase my personal price. I also increased my associates by like $500 just to make it not like so night and day. Just so that I by default, it scaled me back to 5 weddings because not that many people were willing to invest that much money up front. And that's, once again, that's without an album. So that's just my base coverage. So yeah, that's kind of what spurred me into doing that, is that I just said, I really want to make sure that this year is spent enjoying my son's first year of life and not being like, all right, Dad, here he is on Saturday, go to the beach and enjoy him because I have to go work. But I wanted to be the one to take him to the beach, and I wanted to be the one to take the boys out on walks with my husband and just enjoy that first year of motherhood because I wasn't sure if I would ever get to experience that again. So that's kind of what spurred me on. And after I experienced a year of that, and full disclosure, I didn't just shoot 5 weddings. I think I had 6 booked for myself. And then I shot a couple with each of my associates just for, continued education and working on style with them. So I think but even those, I didn't shoot full wedding days. I often would just like surprise the bride and show up just for bride getting ready and then like through portraits or something. So I'd show up for like 4 hours. So I think I did like 12 total last year. And it was phenomenal. And I am so thankful that I did that. And this year I kept my prices where they were. And I'm like, this year I'm hoping to book a few more myself. I'd like to book up to 10, maybe, 15 would probably be my max. Because I'm also itching. Like last year I was like, it's a Saturday. I have a Saturday off. And I love weddings. Weddings are fun. And I love the hustle and bustle of them. I love the drama of weddings. Like there's very little about a wedding day that I don't like. And so there were times last summer that I was like, oh man, I wish I was shooting with Josh right now, or Maddie's at this amazing wedding and I wish that I was with her. But it was worth it just to have time with my family.
Totally. And I mean, it's luckily you structured everything in a way that it seems like, well, 1, it worked. And then 2, hopefully you'll be able to transition wherever you want after this, like you said, and kind of say, hey, we did 5 for this year, but we're going to book something else. And I totally get that. This was my first year, or 2017 was my first year where I had more weddings on weekends than not. And just like that feeling of every weekend, hey, you got to do this. You got to go through this routine. You got to make this happen. You got to look for this customer's information. And it was so like systematized and I loved it. I knew what I was doing every Saturday, or every weekend.
Right.
Like there was no question. And that was really great just to have some kind of like continuity. So I could easily see like the idea that, oh, I don't have anything this weekend. Like January I have off basically. And it's been really weird just to be like, what do I do today? Well, I could do the same thing I did yesterday, and whereas like our spouses are like, it's our only day off. Let's go do something.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's the point that I came to is if Adam worked a normal job, or sorry, if Adam worked like a job that I work and I worked a normal job, then it would look different. So for him, he's working 9 to 5. And so Saturday and Sunday is his only day off. So if he were working with me or had a creative job, then I probably could take more weddings because then we can take off on Monday and Tuesday. But that wasn't the case. And so I knew that if we were going to have family time, it had to have been on weekends. And weekends are when weddings happen. So I had to make some decisions in that regard.
Totally. So now that you've it sounds like your associates really helped out your business. How many weddings do your associates do a year?
So last year, I think it was either 33, 35, or 38 weddings. I should know this off the top of my head, but we did add a couple last minute at the end of the year. So it was either 33, 35, or 38, somewhere in the 30s last year is what we had. And so like I said, I did 5 or 6 myself, and they did the rest.
Are they all full-time?
They are not. No. So I had 3 associates last year. Josh is he's a student up in Springfield, and so he lives up in Springfield, Massachusetts, works through the week, and then only shot for me on weekends. He's the only one of my associates that only works for me. He doesn't have his own business. He doesn't have an LLC. I trained him from the ground up, so he started with me a couple of years ago, just assisting, and he's somebody that I've known since he was a child, so we grew up together. He's a handful of years younger than me. And so he's somebody that came to me and is like, oh, I really like photography. Can you train me? And I'm like, yeah, why don't you come on some weddings with me? And I loved how he interacted with people. He's a phenomenal just communicator with people. He's great with wedding parties. I always joke, I'm like, Josh, you're not here to like make friends with every member of the bridal party. Like you're here to shoot, make sure that you're actually working. So his personality is something that I'm like, this is a guy that I want on my team. And I can train him to shoot. And so that's what I did is I just started working with him on shooting. And he actually, I tell him often to this day that he picked up photography quicker than anybody I've ever met. So he learned a lot of the things that photographers really struggle with. So lighting and posing are the 2 first things that I'm like, he nailed lighting within like a couple weeks of me showing him how to do lighting. So like the hardest situations of, dark barns and tall ceilings and things that freak most photographers out, he nailed that within like 2 or 3 weekends. And then posing, he pretty quickly grasped onto really quick. And the nice thing with him is that because he didn't have any formal training or had his own business, he didn't have to unlearn anything to shoot in my style. So to this day, he's still, of my associates, his style is probably the most similar to mine just because he didn't have his own style going into it. So all he knows with how to shoot weddings is how I trained him to shoot weddings. So that works out great for me. My next associate is Maddie, and she's been with me the longest. I shot Maddie's senior portraits years and years ago, and then she interned for me, and I offered her an opportunity to become an associate of mine. She has her own business, and it's Madison Abbey Photography. She's a really talented, like boho. She does a lot of like, boho type weddings. She loves, her ideal wedding is probably like a bride in, a rue de Seine gown, running barefoot through a field with a flower crown and like long wavy hair, just like your epitome of the boho bride. That's Maddie's ideal client. And our client is the polar opposite. So we do higher end, classic and stately New England affairs. And Maddie's just the sweetest soul I've ever met. So she's been phenomenal to work with because she's so great at keeping people nice and calm on the wedding days and really getting those emotive moments because of how she's such a soulful person. So she was one that shot with me. And then Jean is my last one. She's one of my newer ones. She also has her own business, specializing in newborns and families. And she got to a point where she was like, I love shooting weddings, but I'm tired of all the stuff that goes into weddings. So the marketing to brides and the dealing with timelines and all the questions back and forth and, I mean, you know how it is working with brides. There's just a lot that goes into it. I love that aspect of it. It's actually one of my favorite parts of running a business is all that communication and correspondence and, should we do this flower or that flower or this shade of blush or that shade of blush? And I love that kind of stuff. But Gina got to a point where she's like, I love shooting weddings, but I just can't handle all of the stuff that goes into it. So it worked out great for me because she did her own thing of shooting families and newborns through the week, and then she did weddings with me on the weekends. So yeah, those are my 3 associates last year. Gina recently got married herself and is just scaling back for this year. So she'll no longer be working with me as an associate for this year. But Josh and Maddie are still with me, and it's great. I love having a team. I love working in a team environment. They're phenomenal. So yeah.
That's awesome. What does that look like just on like a weekly basis? Do you guys interact just online or just via phone call? Or, how does that go, kind of your weekly workload during wedding season?
Yeah, it's been a learning curve. It's been a learning curve because I didn't have anybody to watch or learn from when I started with associates. So I feel like I had to figure everything out myself. And I reached out to a couple of photographers who had associates and was like, hey, I'm willing to pay you for a mentoring session. Like, I just need to know how to do this just practically. Like, how do you do contracts and payments and getting cards and film and like just the practical sides of things. And when I started, pretty much everybody was like, no, like there was nobody that was willing to mentor me at all or help me. So it was like learning everything from the ground up. Thankfully, last year I scheduled a mentoring session with Nancy Ray, who has an amazing team down in North Carolina, and finally got around to, I was years into having associates, but I had just gotten to a place where I'm like, part of this is working phenomenally well, and part of this is not working at all. And there were some definite learning curves that, my associates have been really gracious with me of just giving me great feedback and things that I need to do better as a team leader. And then me just also realizing that certain systems weren't working well in the office. So all that they do is shoot. So I do all of the correspondence, all the client meetings, setting everything up. They literally just get to show up and shoot, which is the fun part of photography. As you know, like a lot of photographers are like, man, I wish that I could just like shoot all the time. Or people, like my dad always calls me through the week. He's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, working. And he's like, it's a Tuesday. And I'm like, do you not understand, like 10 years in, that shooting the wedding, the 8 hours that I'm at a wedding is like such a small percentage of what I do for my job. But I will probably spend my life trying to convince my dad and my husband that photography is so much more than just taking pictures. So all that to say, so my associates, I'm like, you literally just get to show up and do the fun part of just shooting. So I was doing everything else from uploading to culling to editing to blogging to meeting with clients and payments and contracts and timelines and all of that stuff. So last year I got to a point where I was like, some of this is working great and some of this isn't working at all. So I hired Nancy Ray to do a mentoring session, and that was phenomenal. I learned a ton of stuff. I learned a lot, and it was really great. But I guess the day-to-day just looks like I set up the timelines. We've got pretty much everything on automation. So I use ShootQ. When I book a client, I can assign one of them, like whoever they're booking as a lead photographer, I can assign that person to the shoot. They get an email saying that they're booked for that day. It's their job to then mark that date down on their calendar. And then from there, we usually schedule the engagement session whenever the client wants. So, sometimes, as you know, sometimes clients book 4 months out and sometimes it's like 2 years out. So the engagement session could be like, hey, what do you have going on next weekend? Or it could be like, we'll touch base in 18 months about.
Do you shoot that or do your associates shoot the engagement as well?
So for the most part, I would say 75% of the time they shoot the engagement session for their clients. And I push for that because that's a good opportunity for them to get to meet the client.
Absolutely.
That they're going to shoot. Yeah. So the exceptions are, so like I said, Josh is up in Springfield, Massachusetts. We have a fair amount of clients that live in New York City. And so I love going into the city. I'm such a city girl, which is partially why I'm obsessed with Europe, but I love going into New York. And it's just easier for me with my schedule to hop on a train and go in and shoot a session than it is for Josh to figure out with schooling and coming from Massachusetts to get down to New York. So I would say some of his New York clients I end up doing. Or like if there's a client that's like, hey, we're going to be home this weekend, if they live out of state, we're going to be home this weekend and we need to shoot this weekend. And if Maddie's got a wedding or something, then I'll just shoot that one. So for the most part, 75% they shoot their own engagement sessions. And then I do the rest of them.
That's awesome. Now,
Yeah.
What was something that you learned from Nancy Ray, who finally mentored you or finally gave you the time? What was one thing, like one change that you made that just kind of hopefully makes everything feel a little bit better now?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I can narrow it down to one, but I would say, all right, I'm gonna list a couple more, but I'll keep it short.
Okay.
So the first one, was just payments. I was honestly paying them far too much, and I had no idea. She looked at my numbers and she was like, "Yeah, you're compared to like all other photographers I know, you're like really overpaying them." So that was just eye-opening for me. And it was good knowing just like, when I get future associates on that, I probably don't need to pay as much. But at the same time, I was like, I liked knowing that I treated my associates well. Like it was satisfactory for me to be like, they do work hard for me. And, they allow me to live the life that I want to live, where I'm able to be home with my son on weekends this year. So I didn't mind that I was paying them probably more than I should have been when just looking at the numbers. So that was just one eye-opening thing. After that, I would say she really just challenged me in just being a leader, and the fact that I did have say in things, and that, they were my team, and not just to see them as a means to an end, but to really take ownership of nurturing them and their creativity and training them as much as I can. So I had done that prior to that, but I think she was kind of the first one to be like, this is your responsibility, but it's also your honor to do that. And I was like that. It was just like a mindset shift for me of, I really I value them so much, and I really want to make sure that I'm pouring as much as I can into them and helping them grow their own businesses. So for Maddie, I'm always telling her, you need to be booking more of your ideal brides, because there is certainly a market out there for the type of photography that you do. And she's so good at it. And so I want to see her succeed and become an amazing photographer and well-known in that niche market that she's in. So I'm really committed to just doing what I can to make sure that any technical aspects, that if they have questions, I'm like, yeah, let's work through this together. So if you're terrible at shooting brides details, let's come over to my house. I'll get a pair of shoes out, some jewelry, a set of invitations, and let's work this out together, and really just pouring into them. So that's something that she kind of challenged me to do as well. I feel like I could say and be like, and this and that. And it was just a really beneficial mentoring session for me.
That's awesome. That's super cool. I feel like that's what I would want in a leader, and, is like, hey, I'm struggling with this. And a lot of times during just the entrepreneurial journey, if you will, that's why I started this podcast. So you had nobody you could reach out to, or just
yeah.
I wonder what this person's mindset is when it goes to Instagram marketing or something like that. And so I was just I want to make an episode for that, or people are starting out or they're like, how do I sell more albums? Well, hey, Alicia has her mindset and how she does it, and just the value that she places on tangible items, and I love that. And then, hey, I think about associates all the time, and I'm probably going to get a lot of emails from this, but it's just how would I do it? How would we do it well? And how could we have a good team? And I think that's something, you and I share similar values, and so we want to have a good team. We're not just hiring people that are, it's not just a number. We're not just hiring oh, that's a $2,000 expense. We're hiring a person,
right?
And that person works for us and the brand and everything that we care about. So I love that. That's awesome. Are you planning on hiring any more associates? Is there room for expansion, or are you guys in a sweet spot now? It sounded like one or two of your photographers are, or at least Gina is leaving, right?
Yeah. So Gina's done as of she ended the year last year. So we've got Maddie and Josh right now. I don't fully have an answer to your question, and part of that is that I think I'm in a place right now, and it started the end of last year, where I'm just reevaluating a lot of things in life in general, and just trying to figure out, so what do we want our life to look like, and what is our purpose as a family, and what do we prioritize? And so full disclosure is that last year was the year that I had my associate shooting the bulk of the weddings. So they did, 20 something, maybe even up to 30. But it was also my most stressful year in business since I've started. And I think part of that was probably the control aspect, that I wasn't there. And so I found myself on Saturdays that I was supposed to be spending time with my family, just worrying about like, noticing the elements outside, being like, it's bright sun and Josh is shooting at the beach. Like, how's he handling this? And do I need to text him? And, just like there's that worry when it's your business and, it's ultimately your name. Like, you just worry about that kind of stuff. Or just little things like, if it was pouring rain and I'm like, and I know that this bride so desperately wanted like gorgeous, sunny portraits. Is Josh going to be able to calm him or her down? How's Maddie handling the situation? So I just found that I was really stressed a lot. And then there were just like simple things of communication that either I could have done a better job communicating with my associates, or the bride didn't get back to us, as quickly as we like with timeline. And so, Josh and Maddie are like, hey, we need to make plans for this morning. And I'm like, I'm still waiting on the bride. So there were just little kinks that needed to be worked out. And I think that led me to a place in the fall of just being like, I really want to simplify my life in general, including my business. So I don't know what that looks like in the future. I think that I love having a team. I don't think I will ever get to a place where it's just me shooting, just because I really like the camaraderie of having a team. I think initially when I got into this, I was like, yeah, I would love to have a team of like 8 associates and shooting a bunch of weddings and like, fast-paced action. And I think now I'm at a point where I'm like, maybe I don't have 8 people and do, 80 weddings a year eventually. Maybe I just have my 2 that I'm really pouring into, and then I'm doing life together with and teaching them the ins and outs and really just pouring into them. And maybe we stick to 30 weddings a year and just raise our prices as the demand comes in, and really focus on making them the very best version of themselves and the best version of a photographer that they can be, allowing them to be as creative as they can be. Maybe that's what it looks like for me. And I don't know fully. That's where I say like I don't have a clear answer, because I'm still working through that myself. But I feel like in my heart, that's what I'm being pulled more towards, is a small team, but bigger impact in each of their lives.
I love that. That makes me want to like go shoot right now and like start associates. Yeah. And I love that. I know the few associates programs that I've paid attention to with different photographers I look up to is it's exactly that. It seems like they hang out together. It seems like they have office time together. It seems like it is a very fun that camaraderie you talked about. It kills the loneliness of entrepreneurship, and I love that. I think that's super cool. And thank you so much for just being on and being really open. I mean, you shared so much, and something I've always loved is I can message you on Facebook and ask you a random question, and you would get back to me, or at least you'd send me a resource. You'd be like, hey, this person has a lot of resources on that. And I think I got introduced to really good photographers early in my journey, if you will, because of you, and it like helped me. I think I had a good head start, if you will, where I was like, oh, I was looking at good work, and you were one of the photographers that I was looking at their work. We didn't necessarily learn photography from you, but I'm glad that I saw your work versus somebody else's when I first started, and it was just like, oh, okay, cool. And like so thank you so much for being on. Is there anything else that you kind of want to share, whether about your journey or something that that you see a lot of photographers or business owners doing that you could be better, or something you've learned that you want to share?
Gosh, that's a very broad question.
Sorry, I have all the broad ones. I want all the answers.
Yeah. No, I would just say like something that I'm very passionate about is just being intentional with how you run your life and your business. So I'm actually this year, one of my biggest focuses is to write a course to launch next January on kind of goal setting, but having an intentional business. And it's something that I'm passionate about, kind of based off of what we talked about of, for me, it was having that first year with my son and knowing that I was spending time with him. But that can look different for every person. So for some people, it's, having that white space in their life to be able to travel. For some people, it's having that white space to be able to spend time with family. For some people, it's, just to learn a different hobby or to to be able to have every second Saturday off to go to the beach in the summertime so that they're more creative when they're on the job. Something I'm extremely passionate about is just being intentional with how you run your life so that your business comes from a place of purpose and intention. So that's a whole other topic for a whole other day. But I would just say, like, for photographers listening to this, that if you're in a place of overwhelm and if you're in a place of just feeling like the to-do list is never ending and constantly stacking up and you're always playing catch up, to sit down and really prioritize what you want your life to look like. So what's important to you, what is valuable to you, what makes your heart soar, what makes your soul happy, and run your business from that place rather than a place of trying to catch up and trying to get ahead and trying to figure out all the new things that all the people are doing of, starting a newsletter list and the latest Instagram trends. And now there's Facebook ads and, well, no, now Facebook ads changed the game. So I got to relearn it again. And there's SEO and there's all these things that are constantly changing. And so rather from running of a place of like trying to play catch up and trying to get ahead, instead running your business from a place of this is what I value in my life. And so that's what takes priority. And my business is a direct correlation to that, and how I run my business is just it comes off of how I run my life. So I would say that's something I'm passionate about, and I would love to see other photographers run their businesses from that place of just knowing what's important to them, and just prioritizing how they run I always say, like, how you run your minutes is how you run your hours, which is how you run your days and your weeks and your months and your years and your life. So I'm planned right down to the minute. Like I've got you scheduled in until 3 p.m., which is in 4 minutes. Yeah. So yeah, I would just say, run your business from a place of knowing what's important to you in life.
I love that. That's so awesome. Thanks so much, Alicia, for coming on. And I'll link your Instagram and your website in the show notes. And I would encourage people just to message Alicia and ask her any question. And like, she's seriously such an open book. And also bonus, you get cute photos and videos on Instagram of her son and her dog, which is awesome. And just for clarifying, if it wasn't clear, her husband's name is also Adam. So just something fun. But Alicia, thanks so much for being on. It's so confusing. Yeah, yeah, especially
even for me. I'm like, Alex. Why did I name? Like, why can't I just have a Bob? Yeah. Next child's gonna be named Bob.
That's good advice. I'll tell my wife, like, hey, we're not doing the naming thing. We're gonna name our kid like Quirk Face or something.
Yeah, right.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alicia.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Man, such a wonderful episode with Alicia of Alicia Ann Photographers. She's such a good friend, and she's very intentional. We have a lot of intentional people on our podcast that are just like, they've got their plans. They've been in the business for a long time, and longer than I have, and I absolutely love her intentionality. She's just so good. You can check out her Instagram in the show notes. It's filled with amazing work, and then also the story is just super personal and kind of fun, and she just has like a really fun life, I think. And she's in the very Northeast, that she's just gonna have a different perspective than a lot of photographers who live in the South or live in the West Coast. And so I love her perspective. So check that out. If you haven't yet, make sure you're checking out the Patreon if you want to support the podcast. There's still a few slots left for the early access, and that's kind of the easiest and the least expensive way to get in. So definitely do that. And we will see you next week. Have a wonderful day.